You may be wondering what these bikes have to do with planting trees. You'll find out coming up. Over the past 20 years as a garden designer, I've enjoyed helping homeowners create private sanctuaries full of beauty and wonder. I find each garden to be a fresh opportunity to explore ways to create uniquely personal spaces. These are just a few of the gardens I've helped to transform into garden homes. Hi, I'm Alan Smith. Welcome to The Garden Home, a show about design and style and ways to blur the lines between inside and out. And today's show, we're going to take you to some very special places and have a little fun. We're going to focus on the subject of trees. Now you may be asking yourself, what do trees have to do with blurring the lines between inside and out? Well, trees play a huge role in the environments we live in, whether it's outside or inside. Think about what your home is made of and the furniture you sit on. And then outside, look at this gorgeous setting. What would it be without trees? Today we're here at Filoli, an estate near San Francisco, which is very beautiful. And we'll get to it a little later in the show. But for now, I want to tell you about an organization that's doing a lot to raise awareness about the planting of trees. Hey, I know I'm out of uniform. I don't usually wear this or garden on the back of a bicycle, but what I want to tell you about is a great event. This is the Tour de Trees, and it's all about raising awareness about the importance of planting trees across the country. The Tree Fund puts on an event that's attended by people who enjoy road biking. Yes, even families. And their 5 to 7 day cycling trek is not just about great scenery and good friends, it's about making a difference in communities through trees. You see, as they make stops along the way, they plant trees and talk to people about the responsible planting of trees for the future. I caught up with veteran Tour de Trees participant Tom Ordway of Indiana, who tells us about why he participates.
Tour de Trees is the biggest fundraising event that the Tree Fund has. It all goes for research and education, and eventually just gets put back into our communities so we have healthier urban forests. In Indiana, we're trying to adopt kind of a catch-all phrase that goes back to the old schoolhouse days, the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. The 3 R's of proper tree care would be right tree, right place, and planted in the right way. Be very, very important. It's simple to remember. Planting a tree, it doesn't involve rocket science, but it involves a lot of forethought and planning and aftercare. It really does.
Particularly if you want those trees to be there for generations to come.
Right, it's a big investment. I mean, they'll add a lot back to the community. You spend a little bit of time now, allow that tree to grow. They're genetically meant to be around for a long time. If you care for them, they can add a lot and bridge a lot of different generations and help them out too.
Now, you work for a power company,
right,
which seems like an odd thing to me because we think of power companies as those who go in and cut trees out in a very irresponsible way.
Yeah.
It's nice to see someone from the power company side involved in an event like this.
Yeah, a lot of companies hire professional foresters to maintain the rights of way. There are a few or handful of utility foresters here on the tour, and they have a passion that really cares about the industry, not just to be able to clear wires because of the tree conflict, but to be able to give back in a different way for the research and education, because it can funnel back into the utility industry and help our calls also. So this is my 4th tour, and it's just phenomenal, just the diversity of the landscape in California.
Oh, it's gorgeous, isn't it?
It takes your mind off the miles that you have to put in. It's all psychological. You know, you get a little bit of physical training, but the views, the mountains, the ocean.
The best part is we're saving trees and the food's not too bad. Isn't it great to see so many people show up for an event like this? What's wonderful is these trees will be here for generations to enjoy. At the Tour de Trees, I had an opportunity to talk to several arborists about the 7 large oak trees at the Garden Home Retreat. Now, based on their recommendations, they said I needed to get a really good arborist. So I contacted Mark Chisholm, who came out to the farm to show me the type of pruning I need to do in order to keep these beauties strong and healthy. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Alan, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for coming out here.
My pleasure.
Well, we really are excited about the work you're going to do.
Yeah, I'm very excited too. These trees are just magnificent.
We call them the Seven Sisters. There's 7 of them, and I guess one of them could be designated as the big sister.
The one right in front of the center door. That's perfect.
That tree is sort of the epicenter of all the activity around here. Well, tell me a little bit about what you think of these trees and what we need to do.
Sure. First off, we do a quick little hazard evaluation, mainly for keeping everyone out of harm's way.
Now, when you think about taking on a tree, for instance, these 2 sisters here,
right.
What are the first things you look for?
Generally speaking, we look at things like what we call the 3 Ds, which is dead, diseased, and dying.
What about the actual getting to the cuts? I mean, there's the how-to of this.
Cutting a branch requires a lot of things to consider depending on the size. A small branch is very easy to go up with a pair of hand snips or a handsaw and just hold on to it and make a proper cut. But when you're using larger limbs especially, you got to think about a few things. If you're using a chainsaw like we do day in and day out, you have to obviously know about chainsaw safety and all that. What we try to do is make a cut that will eliminate the branch without damaging the trunk tissue. So we use what we call a 3-step cut, which is basically on a large limb. You make an undercut slightly into the underside, so that way the tree doesn't pinch the saw. You stop before you get too deep. Then you make a topping cut on top of that same cut or slightly out beyond it, so that when the limb gets to that point, it sits down and then breaks off and it severs it.
So Mark, is there a particular time when a homeowner should really consider bringing in a professional?
Yeah, absolutely. It depends on a lot of things, to be honest with you. For example, the current positioning of the tree, where if it's near power lines, near a house, near a roadway. Rule of thumb is if you haven't tackled it yourself very, very often, or you're just not feeling that you're very comfortable with the situation, perfect time to call in a pro. Another reason is whenever you have to take your cutting or pruning practices above ground. I think it's a dangerous thing. As an arborist, we don't work without firm footing on the ground or being anchored to the tree or in a lift.
Sure.
That's the only place we really feel comfortable and safe.
I'm sure to that point, having the right equipment is really important.
Yeah, it's we never work in a tree without having our personal protective equipment, and what we term PPE, and it starts with head protection, which is a helmet or a hard hat, depending on your application. As a climber, we need to have a helmet situated on our head, and this helmet is built for climbers because it allows me to have a chin strap, and if I turn upside down, it stays on my head and keeps protecting my head. Where the hard hat styles are made for working on the ground, where you can deflect the debris easier for felling and such.
Very good. Well, I didn't know the difference.
Yeah, there is
a difference.
Now. Yeah. Absolutely. And for me, you also need hearing protection, and you can either go with an earplug like I use, or you can use the earmuff style hearing protection. And then we move into the eye protection, which of course is definitely a must-have, so that it's impact resistant and made for this particular type of work. And lastly, we have chainsaw protection in the form of chainsaw pants or also in chaps. And these pants are made to have material that will actually stop the chain from moving. Once it comes in contact with that material, it pulls out and stops the chain very quickly.
I've seen that work. I mean, it's amazing.
It is amazing.
It just really clogs up the chain.
Yep, and it doesn't always protect you 100% from getting a cut at all, but it greatly reduces the risk of having a major injury.
We've all stood under the shade of a tree someone else has planted, and really the difference in temperature can be extraordinary. I think about the temperature here as opposed to what it is just on the other side of these trees, and there has to be a 20 to 25 degree difference. So trees really can help us conserve energy in our homes, and they can have an effect on the resale value of your property. Just take a look at an old neighborhood, and one of the first things you'll notice are the trees. The largest amount of heat coming into your home during the summer is from sunlight hitting down on your roof and windows. Just a little bit of shade from trees can make a big impact on the amount of energy it takes to cool your home in the summer. So when considering a tree for your home, think about deciduous trees that are leafy during the warm months but bare during the winter. In the summer, they protect your home from the sun, but in the winter, they allow the sunshine to heat the roof of your house and bringing warmth in. Now here's a tip. The best time to plant a tree is when it's dormant. That's usually in the late fall, winter, or early spring. You want to make sure that you water them regularly. You see, during the growing season, newly planted trees should be watered every other day or so. And once the tree's established, to keep it healthy, you'll want to water it at least once a week with deep soakings. Now, trees aren't only energy savers, but they can also help boost the resale of your home. According to some studies, as much as 7 to 20%. All you have to do is look around and you realize that trees are used to make so many items that can be found in a home, from the frame of the house itself to the furniture we sit on. We all know that trees are a renewable resource, but as a consumer, I know it's my personal responsibility to make wise choices. That's why when it comes to buying wood products, I look for companies who are using wood from managed forests. I recently had an opportunity to visit a furniture factory in Hickory, North Carolina, where they're observing the time-honored methods of creating beautiful wood furniture. But what I really liked about this factory was how green and environmentally conscious they are.
And it used to be a wagon wheel factory, but then when the wagon wheels weren't needed anymore, we had all this craftsmanship and these people that were capable of doing some really great stuff with a great work ethic.
Well, not to mention the hardwood forest you have all around here with all these magnificent trees.
Exactly. So you had two of your great assets. You had a wonderful raw material at the material itself, the wood, and then you had a work ethic with the people that really wanted to do craftsmanship.
Well, I can see that here today, and just the pride and workmanship. One of the things that struck me are some of these I guess you call them case goods, the cabinets and so forth, the way the veneers work, and the choice of wood for a particular piece of furniture. I mean, I would be hard-pressed to know the difference between an antique and some of the things you're producing. So many arenas in the world today, everyone's talking green this, green that. It's got to be sustainable. It's got to be ecologically friendly. It's got to be environmentally friendly. What are some of the things that you all are doing here at Hickory Chair that you would consider green? Now, I think one of them is that you're producing heirloom quality furniture that's going to be around for a long time, so that in itself is sustainable.
Right. Well, I think that sustainability is, like you said, the timelessness of the piece, that it's not something you're going to cast away and discard in a couple of years. One of the things we look at is how to identify waste in all of our processes, and that includes wasted labor that is not value added. But then when we recycle, I think that's an appropriate thing, but we do more than recycle. We try to find out what's creating the waste in the first place and go upstream. And if we're finding that we're recycling a lot of large boards, we look at the pattern and say, how can this be used differently? We try to figure out a way to repurpose that scrap. And that's been a big improvement over the last couple of years. It's being responsible citizens. If no one's in a department, we turn out the lights. I mean, that's not like a huge thing, but in a 640,000 square foot plant, that's waste that we've identified. And now people are very conscious that they just don't leave lights on or leave machines running. They're just more careful and thoughtful.
Well, I have to say, you all have come a long way from making spindles from wagon wheels to what you produce today.
Well, thank you.
If we take a moment and look through the windows and doors of the summer kitchen, you can see in that view the trucks pouring the concrete. It's a little hard to imagine right now that will be a rich, verdant lawn, and under it will be 5,000 gallons of fresh water. What I like about this tank or reservoir that'll be sunk below the ground between these buildings is that it's really a green component because we're harvesting rainwater that otherwise would just spill out onto the ground. So it's an act of soil conservation because we're not washing soil down the hill into the river, and we're taking a precious resource, rainwater, and reusing it in the gardens. Now, what's interesting about the size of this thing, it'll hold 5,000 gallons. And who knows over the course of a year how many gallons will actually cycle through this system. Now, before we leave this area, I want to point out something that I'm really crazy about, and that's the porches. You see, these are the perfect transition space, meaning a transition from inside to outside. And we've spent a lot of time focused on exactly what these outdoor rooms are going to look like. When you choose outdoor furniture, it can be a little tricky. You want something that's durable, that will last a long time, but it also needs to look stylish. On my front porches and covered areas, and even around the pool of one of my design clients, I've been using this weather-resistant wicker furniture with great success. It comes in an array of colors and with cushions made of fabric that can take the abuse Mother Nature often throws its way. Hey, even the chlorinated water from the pool doesn't fade this stuff. Now, if wicker isn't your thing, then think teak. It's a very tried and true outdoor performer. Teak is the ideal complement to this outdoor fireplace because of the color and weight of the pieces. They fit the scale of this outdoor room. Now, if you have an older piece of metal furniture and think it's seen better days, you might consider taking it to a local powder coating shop where they can sandblast it and give it a new life with this long-lasting powder coat finish. What a transformation! And really, what sets off an outdoor living space, regardless of the style of furnishings you have, are the accessories and accents that you bring from inside the home outdoors. You want to enjoy your space to the fullest. I have a phrase carved into a stone in my garden that says, "Consult the genius of the place." It's by Alexander Pope. And what this simply means is to really get to know the spot and learn what it is trying to tell you about itself. It's a great motto that I always try to follow in my garden designs. Sharon Mosley is a neighbor of mine and also a master gardener. For years, she and her husband tried to force their garden to fit the typical norm. As you can see from these winter photos, the Mosleys weren't happy with the results. Sharon tells us how their garden transformed from this to this.
We had so many 100-year-old trees surrounding the property. Eventually we discovered this was going to be a shade garden, and we decided we would go with what we call a no-mow backyard. We would do ground cover, a lot of vinca and ivy that suppress the weeds. Then we started doing some raised beds, and little by little we kind of got this green space going. And then we decided we loved the water features with the sound, and we loved to entertain, and we really, decided little by little things would just be green. A lot of our area in this Victorian neighborhood, as far as our gardens and our yards, they're actually dictated by our trees.
Sharon brings up a good point. When you plant a tree, you need to think about how large it's going to become and how quickly it will reach maturity. Obviously, 100 years ago, her backyard would have been sunny, but today it's a shady oasis. Just something to keep in mind as you consider planting trees. Tell me about the name of the property, because for years I just assumed that it was some Italian name.
Well, we've even had people try to get in the gate by saying that they went to school with the Filoli kids. No, Filoli was a saying that Mr. Bourne liked: to fight for a just cause,
F-I,
to love your fellow man,
L-O,
and to live a good life.
L-I.
Filoli.
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 Very good. And what has struck me is the marriage between the house and the garden. They seem to be equally weighted here.
Yes, they do. And I think we also have to include the beauty of the natural environment completely outside of the garden. If we just look to the north or the south, all of that is protected land.
What do you consider your favorite part of this particular property?
You know, that's an impossibly difficult question to answer.
I'm sure.
But I guess if I had to pick today, outside, I'm going to pick right near here. It's just the seating that's at the bottom of this path, where you get to be surrounded by the garden, but in fact you're looking out at the wonderful hillside that has always been there.
Tom, I have to say the architecture it's certainly beautiful, but it's a curious blend of various styles, isn't it?
Isn't it though? Yes. It's basically a Georgian house, and we can look at the shape and all with the courtyard in the front and the various things about it and know that it's inspired by Georgian architecture. One of the reasons it works too, and it works particularly here in California, is to have the Spanish, we used to call them thigh tile roof. That's California. And if you look carefully, you've got French windows, and you're putting together these various parts of of the American dream.
Do you think that the layout of the house and the garden was really inspired by his time in England, and that this really feels like a great English country house?
Oh, I think so. I think one of the things that that says that to me anyway is the fact that the house and the garden in a sense are separated. This wonderful part of the garden here is separate from, and you must make an effort to walk to the garden, the major parts of the garden.
Right.
And I think this was very much taken from the English.
You know, and the way the exterior is designed, of course we don't have walls in these garden rooms, but you have this beautiful balustrade. The paving defines the space. And then those colossal Irish yew that punctuate and create a sense of rhythm. They really are gorgeous.
They architecturally hold this whole garden and the house together, I think.
Yeah, it's really a wonderful example, and I think a good teaching tool to show how you can bring scale from the architecture out into the garden seamlessly. Yeah.
And we take the garden into the house. I think one of the outstanding things as you tour the interior of the house is to see the incredible flower arrangements in there.
Are the flowers cut here on the property?
Oh my goodness, you're not allowed to bring even a rose onto the, not
I love that
chance.
policy. I love that. Homegrown.
No, homegrown.
So of course today, Tom, this property belongs to the National Trust.
That's right. Yes, when the Bournes passed away, the house was sold to the Roth family, and the Roth family lived here for 38 years, and it was a wonderful donation by them, plus a handsome endowment, which allowed Filoli to be given to the National Trust and allows us to be here today.
You must get up every morning excited about coming to this place.
Well, I know that it's going to be a wonderful day, and look at this one that we're in today. It's
Beautiful.
Just a fabulous place.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming.
Now, we've talked a lot about trees in this show, but what are some things you should think about when you're choosing a tree for your home? Well, one thing you should think about is when you plant it. The best time to plant a tree, I think, is when the tree is dormant, and that's usually in the late fall, early winter, and very, very early spring. The summer, on the other hand, can be a particularly brutal time of the year. Well, not only for trees, but for anything newly planted. And that's why water is so essential during the hot, dry months. Here's some tips for keeping your plants hydrated without breaking the bank. Deep soaking shrubs, trees, flowers, and lawns encourages more vigorous roots that grow deeper. This is more beneficial than a frequent light watering. Try using soaker hoses in flower beds and water bags around trees and shrubs. To cut down on evaporation, watering in the early morning before the sun comes up is best. Now, keeping moisture in the soil of your flower beds is as easy as applying a generous layer of mulch around your plants. In containers, mix a water-retentive polymer into the soil and keep a saucer under the pot to collect any runoff water. When mowing, leave the blades of your grass slightly longer by just a couple of inches and hold off fertilizer until the end of the season to slow down lawn growth. Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. I'm going to sure hate leaving this beautiful place. It really is a picture, isn't it? Just take a look back there at those mature trees and how they create a canvas for this beautiful picture to be painted on. Those trees were planted 90 years ago, and the original developers of this garden, well, they had future generations in mind. All we can hope is that the saplings we plant today will be enjoyed by future generations. From the Garden Home, I'm Alan Smith. More information about today's topic and other topics covered in this series can be found at pallansmith.com.
On an upcoming episode of P. Allen Smith's Garden Home.
We're going wild for wildlife in this show that's full of surprises and beauty. We'll talk chickens, bees, birds, butterflies, sheep, horses, and even deer. There's so much to do and see. I hope you'll spend a half hour with me here at the Garden Home.